Imagine walking along the banks of a river, only to stumble upon a headless body. Now imagine this happening not once, but over a dozen times. A faceless killer lurking in the shadows, striking without warning, leaving behind only fear and mutilated remains. This is the chilling reality of the Cleveland torso murders, one of America's most gruesome and unsolved crime sprees. Between 1934 and 1938, the city of Cleveland, Ohio, was gripped by terror. A mysterious serial killer was stalking the streets, preying on the city's most vulnerable. His victims, mostly homeless men and women, were found dismembered, their heads and limbs severed with near-surgical precision. Some bodies were even drained of blood, leading to eerie whispers that the murderer was no ordinary man, but a deranged doctor or a butcher with a taste for human flesh. The first known victim, later referred to as Victim Zero, was discovered in September 1934 along the shores of Lake Erie. The corpse, so badly mutilated that identification was impossible, set the tone for what would become one of the most horrifying crime waves in American history. Over the next 4 years, at least 12 more victims would be found, scattered throughout the Kingsbury Run area, a lawless, crime-ridden stretch of land filled with drifters, runaways, and outcasts. The Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run, as the press dubbed him, seemed to be hunting those who wouldn't be missed. What made these killings even more terrifying was the precision. The victims weren't just murdered, they were expertly dissected. The bodies were drained of blood, limbs severed cleanly, and often, the heads were removed entirely. Some corpses showed signs of chemical treatment, as if the killer had been experimenting, attempting to prevent decay or destroy evidence. It was a level of brutality unlike anything the city had seen before. As the killings continued, law enforcement was under immense pressure to bring the butcher to justice. In 1935, Cleveland's safety director, Eliot Ness, the legendary crime fighter who took down Al Capone, was called in to lead the investigation. If anyone could stop a killer, it was Ness. But even he was baffled. The killer left almost no clues, no clear pattern, no connection between victims other than their unfortunate status in life. The murders seemed random, yet methodical. The police launched sweeping raids, arrested dozens of potential suspects, and even tried using undercover officers to lure the murderer out. But the butcher remained a ghost, always one step ahead. In a desperate move, Ness resorted to drastic measures. In 1938, he ordered a full-scale raid of Kingsbury Run. Shanty towns were burned to the ground, vagrants rounded up, and potential suspects brutally interrogated. It was a show of force meant to send a message. But did it work? Shortly after the raid, the murder stopped. But was the killer truly gone, or had he simply moved on? Some believe Ness may have caught the culprit but lacked enough evidence to prosecute. Others think the killer was scared into silence, knowing that law enforcement was closing in. One of the prime suspects was a man named Dr. Francis Sweeney, a troubled surgeon with a history of mental illness and alcohol abuse. He was known to have performed amputations during World War I and had a deep understanding of human anatomy. Ness personally interrogated Sweeney, who allegedly confessed under intense questioning. But without any solid proof, he was never officially charged. Sweeney later committed himself to a mental institution, where he lived out the rest of his days. Did Cleveland's most feared killer die in that asylum, or did the true murderer escape justice? To this day, the case remains unsolved. No definitive evidence has ever been found, and the true identity of the Mad Butcher remains a mystery. Was it a doctor? A butcher? A deranged scientist experimenting with human flesh? Or was it someone hiding in plain sight, blending in with society while carrying out their gruesome acts in the shadows? The Cleveland torso murders stand as one of the darkest, most disturbing chapters in American crime history. A faceless killer who preyed on the forgotten, a city haunted by his bloody legacy, and a case that may never be solved. Who was the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run? We may never know. But one thing is certain, the shadows of Cleveland will always remember his work. The Cleveland torso murders remain one of history's most haunting mysteries. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the unknown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us next time on the Casebook for more chilling tales.